recognize Mrs. Ramirez for her 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member Ivy. I have a couple of comments for Dr. Miller Idris, but I want to come back real quick before that to something I heard a couple of my colleagues mention. And this question is for Dr. Koldorf. I heard that it was referred that you too have been censored by CISA, and sharing that concern that both of you are censored. Could you give me examples of how CISA has censored you?
I was censored by Twitter, by YouTube, by LinkedIn, Facebook, and Reddit. They don't tell who is behind it. So sometimes they don't say anything. Whatever I say just disappears. Sometimes one gets a note saying something of the style of it goes against our standards, but they never tell. They never told me, the person being censored, who was behind it.
So, Doctor, just for record here, I think on record here, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, you have no evidence that they censored you. You were told by Twitter and other social media outlets that you were not allowed to continue posting these things, but CISA itself, there's no evidence was censoring you, correct?
They
yes
never
or no?
never disclosed who sort of was behind it or what was behind it.
Okay. Well, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that that was on the record, that CISA itself had not censored you. There's no evidence of that. So I want to come back, Dr. Miller Idris, to the work that you've been doing, your work on disinformation and the role of hate and community violence. Look, it could not be happening at a more urgent time. We talk about the border here, we talk about children, families, people seeking asylum, and there's all sorts of things that are said about them. And just a few days ago, someone senselessly drove their car into a group of migrants outside of a shelter in Brownsville, the same border that my mother crossed pregnant of me. A witness of the horrible scene heard the attacker make anti-immigrant remarks after he initially tried to run away after pulling his car into people, killing several and injuring more. There isn't always a written manifesto to directly point to when it comes to extreme hate, but we know there's a troubling connection between spreading hateful ideas and extreme violence that destabilizes entire communities. And the cost for this could be human lives. In your testimony, you shared that pace, scope, and scale of violent extremism have probably increased and are escalating rapidly due to propaganda, conspiracy theories, and disinformation. Is that correct?
Yes.
What kind of impact does spreading propaganda and disinformation have on vulnerable communities, such as immigrants and asylum seekers?
The impact on vulnerable communities, of course, is to terrorize them, right? So we saw that in Buffalo, we've seen that in Pittsburgh, we've seen that in record-breaking anti-Semitism and attacks on the LGBTQ community. With every vulnerable community, essentially, we're seeing spikes, surges, or record-breaking hate. Hate crimes are higher than they've been in well over a decade. So the impact is on families that are torn apart, communities that are torn apart, but also people who are afraid to go to synagogue, to go to church, to go to their school board meetings, in some cases, that they're going to be met with violent protesters.
Thank you. And there's this extremely disturbing rise in people who commit extreme violence that cite the Great Replacement theory, which, to be absolutely clear, is a white supremacist conspiracy theory that alleges that white people are being replaced by Black and brown people, including immigrants. In your opinion, what are the most effective strategies for countering conspiracy theories like the Great Replacement theory that promote deadly violence and are frequently a source of inspiration for people who commit horrific violence in our communities?
Well, what we have found is that nobody likes to find out that they're being manipulated. People do not like to find out that they're being manipulated or that they're at risk of manipulation. I think it's extremely difficult to counter propaganda and conspiracy theories. Once they circulate, you get into challenges to freedom of speech, you get into censorship issues, and you also get into ineffective strategies, as we've seen. But what does work is to prevent people from believing it in the first place. We have excellent evidence that that can be done by teaching them how manipulative tactics work and letting them make up their own minds.
Dr. Miller-Idris, I really appreciate all of your work. And Chairman, I yield back.